Fan theories exist across, well, all fan bases, and some of these theories are meticulously researched, well thought out speculations, and others, well, lean more onto the side of outright insanity. But in today's video, I wanted to shed a bit of light on some past and present fan theories from the world of The Walking Dead, and score them all on how realistic they are/were at the time. So sit back, relax, and prepare for some of the most insane fan theories from the Walking Dead universe. Now, this theory suggests that TV show Rick Grimes is immune to the wildfire virus. This specific theory has been circling around the fanbase, ever since 2010, but it especially picked up steam around 2023 when the YouTube channel Clash PR would cover it, garnering hundreds of thousands of views. And it was only further fueled by the announcement of The Ones Who Live, as many people started to speculate that the reason Rick hadn't returned home is because he was being held by the CRM due to his immunity to the virus. However, we do know now that Rick's immunity wasn't addressed in this miniseries, so we can at least count that bit out. But how does this theory actually work? There's essentially two branches to it. Firstly, the more simple one is after Rick shot and put into a coma at the Harrison Memorial Hospital, fans speculated that due to him being hooked up to IVs and machines, that would essentially keep him alive, and due to his reliance on this very machinery, it meant he didn't breathe in any of the wildfire virus through the air, which in turn would essentially make him immune, or at the very least, not affected by the virus. And then there's a slightly crazier version, which suggests after Shane rushes into the hospital to save Rick and the power goes out, he puts his head to Rick's chest, and he doesn't hear a heartbeat. And Shane, by the way, is a trained sheriff, so he would be qualified in first aid. So him not hearing a heartbeat is pretty telling to us. In this moment, Shane renders Rick essentially dead. So if his heartbeat stopped, how did Rick ever wake up from his coma in the first place? Well, it's theorized because the virus lays dormant within everybody, instead of reanimating Rick and turning him into a walker, the dormant virus actually brought him back to life by reigniting his brain, and Rick was somehow able to escape this zombified version and come back as a fully functional human. And this theory basically renders Rick as an actual walker. Meaning if Rick was to be bit, it wouldn't do anything. People also argue this is how Rick was able to survive many of his injuries throughout the various seasons of The Walking Dead, such as getting impaled by a metal pole in season 9. But if you ask me, this theory is well crafted and a fun concept to think about, but there is absolutely no way it's true. As not only would this fundamentally break the show as a whole, but if this was actually the intention of the writers, it would have been revealed to us ages ago. We don't even know if Andrew Lincoln will ever return to play the character of Rick Grimes. So yes, this theory is interesting and a cool concept, but in my opinion, it gives more questions than it does answers. Like, how did Rick reanimate as a functional human? If Rick's immune, why wasn't Carl immune? And is Rick some kind of cure? So whilst I can applaud the creativity of this theory, and I admit it can't be totally dismissed as it's never been addressed on the show, so technically it's still possible, I'm still going to have to give it a 2 out of 10 for how likely this is to come true. We first meet Enid in Season 5, Episode 12, titled Remember, and very quickly it's clear she is far more competent as a survivor than most of the other Alexandrians. We also learn she was the only survivor of her group and turned up at the gates of Alexandria all by herself. Now, we are talking about 2015 here, a time where The Walking Dead viewership was at an all-time high and fan theories ran rampant amongst the community. And this one would suggest that Enid was actually a spy for the Wolves, a hostile group who played the antagonist for a short while in the show. And long before we had Dante as a spy for the Whisperers, people believed Enid was the original spy, believing her to have gained the trust of Alexandria, learnt about their blind spots and weaknesses, and tipped off the Wolves to attack. And during Season 5, this theory built up a fair bit of momentum. So, what evidence was there to actually support this claim? Well, in a conversation with Carl during the Wolves' attack on Alexandria, she says the lines,
"There are too many blind spots. That's how we were able to.
They got in the walls.
The use of the word "we" heavily implied that Enid was actually a part of the wolves, and her lack of emotion during the siege would only add fuel to the fire. People also speculated that Enid tipped the wolves off about Rick and the others clearing the quarry, giving them a perfect time to strike. Again, looking back, we know how wrong this theory turned out to be, but at the time, this was an extremely plausible theory, and we even saw the writers use community spies later down the line, possibly even inspired by this very fan theory. And look, when you delve into this theory a little bit more, you realise the wolves attacked because they found Aaron's photos of Alexandria, and if she was in fact a spy for the wolves, they would have attacked the community long before Rick and the others even arrived there. Look, despite how ridiculous this may all sound in present day, this was a pretty solid fan theory in 2015. So yes, with hindsight we know it's not true, but as theories go, it had some actual thought process behind it, and moments of the show even seem to support this theory. So for those reasons, I'm going to give the concept of Enid being a spy for the wolves a pretty solid 6 out of 10. Arguably one of the most famous scenes in the entire series appears in the episode 18 Miles Out, and it depicts a lone walker wandering aimlessly through a field as the increasingly more isolated Shane looks on from the car window. Now, this scene is most likely meant to symbolise Shane's role within our group. The walker is alone and aimlessly wandering, much like Shane, who is now emotionally and ideologically isolated from our group. Yes, he's still physically with them at the farm, but mentally, he's totally separated from their values and their sense of community. But what if what Shane saw in the field that day wasn't a walker at all, but was in fact an early version of Beta from seasons 9 and 10, before he'd even joined the Whisperers? Now stick with me here, as this theory is one that still does the rounds to this very day. And it states that the Lone Walker, like previously mentioned, is in fact an early version of Beta, but this, in my humble opinion, is outright insanity. Firstly, Beta is from Maryland, meaning this trip would be a 700-mile journey. It's also stated that Beta took refuge in a survivor camp for the early days of the outbreak, and then ended up in an abandoned hospital. So the timelines also just don't really match up here at all. Shane saw the Lone Walker between day 83 and day 86 of the apocalypse, so for this to even have any chance of being true, Beta would have had to have left his camp, put on a suit, which I can't imagine is the most practical choice of clothing in the apocalypse, and take a 2-week walk down to Atlanta. Like, why? This theory is pretty lazy in my opinion. It has no evidence supporting it, and on top of all of this, the Whisperers didn't even exist in the comics at this point. So for me, this theory is just getting a 1 out of 10. Now, the fan theory of Rick having someone he's related to pop up in the show has been around since 2015. When AMC released the spin-off show Fear the Walking Dead, fans speculated that lead character Madison Clark was going to be somehow related to Rick Grimes. Whether it be a cousin or some even thought it might be Rick's sister, people were adamant on this happening, and at the time this was a pretty big fan theory. I mean, I heard it on podcasts and I saw threads of it on Reddit that theorized the shows would eventually merge and Madison and Rick would be revealed to be related in some way, shape or form. But obviously this would never happen, and in regards to the theory, well, kind of like the Lone Walker concept, it's fairly basic. People just took 2 main characters from sister shows and speculated that they might be related, but unlike the Lone Walker, this one was a lot more realistic and an intriguing concept to think about. So for those reasons, I'm going to give it, as a fan theory, a respectable 5 out of 10. But that wasn't the only fan theory about the Grimes family reunion. Perhaps an even more intriguing one is the thought of Jeffrey Grimes, a character from the Walking Dead comics appearing in Daryl Dixon. Now, I've covered this in my Walking Dead iceberg video, but essentially Jeffrey Grimes is Rick's brother in the comics. He appears in a single issue titled The Alien, and it's revealed he travelled to Barcelona, Spain, and couldn't return back to America due to the travel restrictions caused by the outbreak. Interestingly, Rick never mentions having a brother in the show, but he does suggest he has a sister in season 2. but either way, it's never been properly addressed in the series, so it's kind of up to fans' imaginations. But as many of you know, the spin-off show Daryl Dixon is now venturing into Spain, and many think we might either see Jeffrey Grimes or a hypothetical Rick's sister. Now this would be fascinating to see, and a great way to incorporate some lore from the comics over to the TV universe. And this theory not only incorporates facts from the comic book universe, but it's also a huge coincidence that Daryl's even visiting Spain in the first place. Look, we probably won't see Rick's brother in the TV universe in my opinion, but this is a great fan theory. It's imaginative, it uses facts, and it would be awesome to see on our screens. Now, with 2 separate trailers out for Daryl Dixon Season 3 and no mention or glimpse of a Grimes family member, hope is starting to fade for this fairly new fan theory. But this would be incredibly awesome to see. Like, imagine the discovery of another Grimes family member in the show. The community would go absolutely mental. And just think how many people would tune into that episode. I just think this theory as a whole is intriguing, interesting, and has some actual backbone to it. So for those reasons, I'm going to give Rick's brother appearing in the Daryl Dixon show an 8 out of 10. Now, the orange backpack theory is unique in the sense it's not about a character specifically, but about an item within the show. This theory is that every character that would be shown to wear the orange backpack on screen would end up dying somehow. So let's go over the history of the backpack itself first. This item was introduced in the show in Season 3, Episode 12, where we see an unfortunate hitchhiker attempt to flag down Rick, Michonne and Carl, only to be completely ignored. Later on, the trio would be driving back to the prison and see the devoured remains of the man that tried so desperately to flag them down. And on the ground, well, would be his orange backpack that the group would pull over, put into the back, and continue on their journey. And this backpack would end up being worn by several important characters, particularly Glenn and then eventually Carl, causing fans to think that this orange backpack was the writers alluding to a character's death, essentially suggesting that any character that would wear this cursed item would wind up meeting their demise somehow. Now you can imagine the fan uproar when this backpack found its way into the hands of Daryl Dixon. People started the "if Daryl dies we riot" movement, but luckily for them, Daryl would not meet this same grisly demise. And neither would Virgil, the last person seen with this backpack in Season 10, and it hasn't been seen in the universe since that day. This theory was especially big in 2017, around the time of the shocking death of Carl Grimes, and it did seem like a huge coincidence that the owner of this backpack would end up dying over and over again. And although Daryl, like mentioned, would finally break the cycle, I think this is an incredibly well thought out fan theory, and I mean the fact someone even noticed this orange backpack that kept popping up every now and then takes some serious commitment and a keen eye. I mean, this theory actually turned out to be true for a period of time as well, and it became so well known amongst the fanbase that the writers probably deliberately gave Daryl Dixon the orange backpack just to scare fans. So for the insane attention to detail, the originality of it, and predicting Carl's death, the orange backpack theory is getting a 9 out of 10 from me. Now, this next fan theory is one of the coolest I've ever heard, and it's been around for years and become so well known that Scott Gimple even directly addressed it in 2017. The YouTuber The Walkies made a phenomenal video on it a couple of months ago, but essentially this theory speculates that Daryl blinks Morse code at Rick in the episode Service. Throughout seasons 5, 6 and 7 we see a Morse code poster pop up on the wall in one of the houses in Alexandria throughout multiple episodes. And in the episode Service we see Negan bring a captured Daryl to Alexandria as almost like a trophy to taunt a broken Rick. But it's here we see Daryl do something rather strange. He seems to blink repetitively at Rick, and when translated into Morse code, what he blinks translates as the words "I East." And some important background information here is at this point in the show, Rick and the others were still desperately looking for the location of Negan's sanctuary. So fans speculated that Daryl communicated to Rick, giving him some directions to help him find the sanctuary. And look, as mentioned, Scott Gimple would address this fan theory and disprove it eventually. But what a coincidence this is that the Morse code chart appears in the background and Daryl blinks something resembling Morse code in the episode. I mean, in all fairness though, Norman Reedus was probably looking directly into the sun whilst filming this scene, hence why his eye is twitching up and down. But still, this is one of my favourite fan theories in the whole show, because up until Scott Gimple came out to disprove it, I would have totally believed this. I mean, the show does hint towards it with all the Morse code posters in the background, and although this rumour wouldn't turn out to be true, it's insanely well thought out and creative. So for that reason, I'm going to give it an extremely solid 8 out of 10. And last but not least, we probably have the most infamous fan theory from The Walking Dead. That being that The Walking Dead is set in the very same universe as Breaking Bad. Firstly, the car Glenn takes from Atlanta in Season 1 is the exact same model and colour of car that Walter White buys his son, Walt Jr. Secondly, Merle Dixon's drug stash in Season 2 of the show is shown to have blue crystal meth, which is an undeniable hint towards the show. And finally, when Daryl and Beth have a heart-to-heart in Season 4, Daryl mentions a janky little white drug dealer who many assume is Jesse Pinkman from Breaking Bad. I mean, some fans even go a step further, suggesting that Walter White's crystal blue meth is the cause of the wildfire virus. However, me personally, I think the theory that Walter White started the zombie apocalypse is a bit far-fetched. But it's clear that Robert Kirkman is giving a nod to his good buddy Vince Gilligan, the creator of Breaking Bad, throughout the early seasons of The Walking Dead. And there is so much evidence scattered throughout that heavily implies that The Walking Dead does in fact take place in the same universe as Breaking Bad, as well as the fact that AMC broadcasts both juggernaut shows. I mean, this theory has been around since 2010, and it's the original fan theory from the Walking Dead community, so it's obviously going to score pretty highly on the list. However, it's not groundbreaking like some of the others are. In fact, it has no impact on the story itself, and it's more like cool little Easter eggs dotted throughout the early seasons. So for that very reason, I'm going to give this theory a 7 out of 10. But with that being said, that's some of the most famous Walking Dead fan theories from across the years. And if you guys want me to make a Walking Dead fan theories iceberg, let me know down below in the comments. And also, if you think I missed any other theories out, let me know. But I hope you all enjoyed today's video. If you did, please do like and subscribe, as it massively helps out the channel, and we are closing in on 20,000 subscribers. But once again, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Goodbye.